Hey crafty friends, thank you very much for joining me. This is Anna Kessler with Saturday Extravaganza, and today I'm starting a new series called 321 Craft Recipe, and I'll teach you how to create great projects with 321 recipes. So today's recipe is 3 chipboard covering techniques, 2 colors, and 1 photo, and we are going to create a mixed media layout. So let's start by covering our chipboard with basically 3 well-known techniques, but fun and easy, that can get you really nice effects, and you can read on my blog all the tips and tricks that you can get from those techniques. So I'm just removing the inner part of some of the chipboard. It's very small, so I'm using a quilling needle just to remove all those little tiny bits. The first technique that I'm going to use is really easy and fast, and it is covering the chipboard with ink. Now, to get good coverage of the ink, you would need a sort of a sponge or a blender or a tool that will help you apply the ink on the chipboard. Now, try to use ink that is pigment ink or alcohol ink, and those types of inks are less likely to absorb in the chipboard. Chipboard is basically paper. So if you would use something like distress ink, that will give you a very muted color, and you might need to do 2, 3, maybe even 4 layers to get a bright, strong color. So using pigment ink or alcohol ink or any type of non-water based ink will be better to cover chipboard. The second technique is using gesso to cover a chipboard. Now, you might ask, well, why not use just white acrylic paint? Well, you could do that, but gesso will also seal the chipboard in case you wanted to add other stuff on it. It will also give you, of course, that white color, but it will also give you texture, because gesso, of course, depending on what kind of gesso you're using, if you're using heavy gesso like I'm using, then you can create a really nice texture on your chipboard, unlike acrylic paint, which is more of a liquid medium. So gesso will give you 3 for the price of 1 in terms of covering chipboard. So I'm using white gesso. If you want to keep that raw color of the chipboard, you can use clear gesso and still get that texture effect and sealed chipboard ready for more mediums. So of course you would need to dry that well. Moving on to our next technique, which is embossing. Embossing a chipboard is really easy. You would of course need embossing ink, and I'm going to use 2 different embossing techniques. One will be the double embossing, which I'm doing right now on that U-Rock chipboard, and I'm using UT, which is very heavy, thick embossing, ultra thick embossing powder, which has very large little particles. The second technique I'm going to use is only partial embossing, which you're going to see in a second. I'm using the same UT, and don't worry about the amount, it will all go back to the container. Just looking for my tweezers to get that chipboard out of the UT pile. Now what I've done here, you can see, is not covering the entire chipboard with the UT, and I'm just going to leave it like that, and that will give me sort of a part covered, part uncovered chipboard, and that's a really cool look for a chipboard and for anything that you are embossing. It might take you quite some time to melt all the UT because of the big particles that it has. You might need to stay with your heat tool onto the area that you're melting Don't worry about that, but it can take time. But it has a really nice effect because when those little particles melt, then you get a very nice thick layer of embossing. It's a really cool effect. I try to use UT instead of just regular embossing powder, but that's just me. So you see the chipboard on the left is not entirely covered. Some of it is covered and some only has small particles and dots, and I really like that look. So for the left one we're going to leave it like that. For the right one we're going to double emboss, which means that we are going to emboss it again to get a really good coverage and a really thick layer of embossing. So basically once that's dry, you go back with your embossing ink and spread it really well and pour all that embossing powder again on your chipboard. If you need, sometimes it's very delicate shape, so you might need even a third time to get that full coverage that you want. And the more times that you cover it with embossing powder, the thicker your layer will be. So depending on what effect you want to get, will determine how many times you need to emboss. So again, wait for it. It might take a little longer than just regular embossing powder, but I think it is worth it because I love the effect that it has. So bear with me for a little longer, and then we will rock this layout. See that beautiful effect? It's still really hot, so I'm just using my tweezers. And now that all the chipboard are covered, we can go back and create our layout. I'm using some tapes here. This is actually a canvas tape. It's not a washi but a tape, but you can use whatever type you have. Since our recipe requires 2 colors, then I'm using all the black and white supplies that I have. So I want to use this photo without me in it, just for my boys, so I'm just cutting it out. And if you can see there, I still have my hand in the photo, so we will have to cover it later. So I'm starting to add the chipboards. This is the partially covered one. Remember, on the left you can see that it's not fully covered, on the right as well. I really like this effect. And I'm gonna cut these circles and add 3 on one side and 3 on the other side. Basically, I'm just playing around with all the chipboard now, just adding them to my layout. So I'm going to add the photo and cover some of the chipboard, which is fine. We'll give it dimension because it will make it pop out more. And now you rock. I wanted to put it here, but I would put something smaller instead to cover my hand. Remember, it's still there in the photo. So I'm just going to add this chipboard and then another chipboard. And this little tiny chipboard is basically what I removed from its larger brother on the left there, that arrow. So sometimes you can use both the positive and the negative part of a chipboard. Don't forget that. These are scraps from other parts of chipboard that I removed, and I'm going to use that to add more dimension to my photo and just glue it down under it so it won't be in the air. Just using it instead of foam tape, I'm just using a piece of chipboard. Don't throw them away, you can use them. So now I'll just add more of the chipboard pieces that I've covered. And again, the recipe is 3 techniques, which we did, 2 colors, which are black and white. And I've used black and white because I have here 2 kids, 2 brothers, which are basically two opposites like black and white. I really like the statement, the message that these two colors have in terms of being opposite each other but complementary, namely two sides to the same coin. And these are my kids. It just describes them perfectly. That's why I'm doing black and white layout. And the other part of the recipe is one photo. This photo is just amazing. Sorry for my head in there. So I didn't want to add extra photos. I just wanted to have one layout with this photo and let that photo speak. I just want to add a few more black and white stuff, washi tape and other basically a few patterns of washi tape that I have. Oops, let's straighten this out. And I want to add this one as well, also black and white. So basically we're using black and white stuff on this layout. Sometimes creating a layout with one photo can be slightly intimidating because you don't know what to add to the layout. It looks empty, but don't worry about that, because white space or blank space is a good thing on a layout. It helps your eye focus, so don't worry about having empty spaces on your layout. It's a good thing. So I've added some more washi tape and a little piece here. And I've tried to keep this layout kind of a minimalist look. I didn't want too much stuff on it. Just gonna add some doodles with black pen here and there. Some lines. Just scribbles and doodles and things like that. And I think I'm also going to add some words to it. So I'm just gonna add, you know, brothers and things like that, friends, and just descriptive word on those two dudes there in the photo. If you don't like your handwriting, you can just use stickers, or you can skip this part altogether. Still thinking of what else to add, and I think I'll just add a line of words here, and I think that layout will be finished. Yes, I really like how it's turned out. Looks kind of cool. Yes. So I want to thank everyone for joining me to this new series and the 3-2-1 recipe, craft recipe series. And I hope you were inspired. We're going to have many more recipes coming in the future, because I think it's really fun to create projects this way. Kind of gives you a frame of work. So thanks everyone. Please hit that subscribe button, like and comment, and I'll see you all next time.